The date is being given by the Illuminati to trap the New Age people, to trap them into believing they have to prepare for this date, so they're caught totally unawares by what's going to happen in the next 2 months. There's a little comet called Elenin. Every time this little comet is in alignment with our planet and either the sun or some other body, there's a major earthquake. Now, vibrational harmonics work such that if they directly line up, you get an amplification of energy. February 27th, 2010, this little comet was in a direct alignment between the Earth and the sun. On that date, there was an earthquake in Chile. That's just a coincidence, isn't it? Well, there was another coincidence, because when the Earth came around the other side here, and the Earth was in alignment, and then the comet was a little bit closer, but they're in alignment again, and that was September 4th, 2010. There was an earthquake in Christchurch. And then the Earth came back round again, and then the next time it was in alignment with the sun, and now this is closer, March 11th, there's an earthquake in Japan. Once is a coincidence, twice is pushing it, 3 times, wait a minute, something's going on here. The other one that will happen is August 17th. I've gone publicly on this one because there is an alignment between the Earth, Venus, the Sun and Mercury. They're in a straight line, and Nibiru is at right angles to the Sun. At August the 17th, I'm being told there's going to be a massive earthquake on the planet. It will probably be somewhere between Alaska and San Francisco. The next alignment happens on September 26th this year, and it is between us and the sun. And at that point, it is 0.38 away from us. When it was 2 away, we had a magnitude 9 earthquake. The gravitational forces, the infrared forces, they're all 25 times greater on that date. The whole Pacific Rim will go with magnitude 12 to 15 earthquakes. New Zealand will disappear, Japan will disappear, Indonesia will disappear, China will disappear, Korea will disappear, Russia will disappear, the west coast of America will disappear, the whole lot. East coast of Australia will not be affected by the earthquakes per se, but they will be affected by the tidal waves that come from it. There is going to be a cosmic sonic shockwave that will totally blow out our Van Allen belts and our magnetic fields, and will leave the planet totally open to gamma radiation. If you are out in the open at that point, you will literally be fried alive. It's like the vampire jumping out into the light. That's what's going to happen. When this object goes across the sky, it's going to cause an eclipse that will last at least 3 days. So you're going to have all these volcanoes going off, pyroclastic blasts going everywhere, level 12, 13 magnitude earthquakes. The electromagnetic pulses are going to fry all electrics. You're going to have wind speeds over 1,000 miles an hour. You're going to have surface temperatures of 60 degrees plus. All the water surfaces are going to dry up. The volcanic ash is going to cause huge amounts of acid rain. There will be wildfires all over the planet. And they're saying nothing about this? The objective of this is not for me to give you everything on a platter. It's to give you the points where you can go and research it for yourself. I'm going to give you the core, and then you can go and look up the links that I've given you and formulate your own opinions on stuff. When our solar system was forming, all of the cosmic dust and everything starts spinning, because everything's rotational energy. So it all starts rotating. And have you ever wondered why scientists can't explain gravity? They can tell you what it does and the effects of it, but they can't explain it. Because everything in this universe comes from source, right? Can we accept that as a given? Everything comes from source? Everything comes from source down. Highest vibration, lowest density. Okay? Highest vibration, lowest density. Down to lowest vibration, highest density. Now, density is just how many molecules you can cram into a little bit of space. Now, the interesting thing about that is, because everything is just this continuum of vibration, look around. All you're seeing is slowed down light. Every person you look at is just slowed down light. Slowed down through all sorts of different frequencies, slowed down through sound. Sound is slowed down light. You, matter, is just slowed down sound into a higher density. So when the sun was first forming, it wasn't gravity pulling everything together, it was actually things being compressed from outside. It was consciousness compressing down and slowing down vibration. That's why scientists can't explain gravity, because they think it's a pulling thing, and it's not. It's a compression thing. So here we've got all of our little dust, cosmic bits and pieces and hydrogen atoms and all those things, all being compressed down so it can form a level of consciousness. Because there's like tram stops along the way here. And we can give them names. We can call it 11th density, or 9th dimension, or 7th dimension, or 5th dimension, until we get down to 3rd dimension. It's just a label. And I'll give you an example. If I play a G string on a guitar, and my ears can only hear G, nothing else, and then I tune that guitar string up to a G sharp, when I play it, I can't hear it. It doesn't exist. Doesn't exist. That sound doesn't exist because I can't hear it. That's why people say, I don't believe in fifth dimensional beings, because I've never seen one. Because you can only see with your eyes in a light spectrum that's this big. Can anyone here see infrared? Can anyone here see ultraviolet? But we know they exist, but we can't see them because our measuring device doesn't have it. So here's all of these atoms compressing down to form our sun, and they're spinning. Whenever you have a fluid that is spinning, it moves around. And remember, no balance in the universe. Don't want balance. So it's out of balance. So as it's spinning, it's out of balance, and it wants to try and balance it the same way as that Fibonacci spiral is getting closer and closer and closer to 1.618 but never gets there. It's trying to balance itself. So this little bit that's on the side here starts to move apart and eventually gets thrown off. And this part comes more into balance. And eventually ignites and forms our sun. But as it's spinning, it forms a galactic plane of dust. I'm going to sort of draw this as best I can. Like a CD that sort of radiates out. Has anyone seen what happens when you vibrate something with sand on top of it, like a disc, how it forms rings? Have you ever looked at the rings of Saturn? What they are is they're harmonic nodes. Whatever the frequency is of the thing here, it creates nodes. And those node points are where things will start to form. So there is a real mathematics, and you can look this up as well, as to where planets will form around an object. So our solar system, while it's forming our sun, is also forming planets through rotational energy and vibration. In the meantime, this little bit of cosmic plasma that was thrown off from the sun goes off here, and it does the same thing. It starts to form its own little circle, and it forms its own little planets around it. But this one doesn't have enough mass to ignite the way the sun does. So what it forms is something that's called a brown dwarf. A brown dwarf star. Most of us have been aware of Nibiru, whatever you want to call it, the destroyer, Planet X, for ages. How did it come about? Up until the beginning of the last century, I think it was 1927, we could see Saturn. That was as far as we could see Saturn. And when they started analysing Saturn's orbit, they realised there was something of bigger mass outside of Saturn that was pulling it out of its regular orbit. So they punched the figures into a computer when the computers came around, or they calculated, whatever they did, and they found Neptune. They went, yay, that's it, we found it. And then when they analysed Neptune's orbit, they went, oh, hang on a minute, something else is pulling Neptune around. So they did their calculations again, and lo and behold, they discovered, hang on. Well, they found Uranus first, and then they found Neptune. So they thought, that's it, we've solved the problem. And then they analysed Neptune's orbit and went, no, hang on a minute, there must be something bigger outside of that, because it's being pulled out of orbit by something else. And then they found Pluto. Well, Pluto's a P. That's not doing it. So they then said, there must be something bigger outside of Pluto that is pulling it, and it's got to be huge, it's got to be massive. And in 1983, NASA announced that there was a brown dwarf star outside of our solar system, which belongs to this star. It's not from somewhere else. It has an orbit around our sun, because everything revolves around it, and because this came from our sun, it has an orbit around our sun. Are they telling us this? No. Why not? Why wouldn't they tell us this? So everyone thinks this is what happens. Here's the sun, and then you go out in a line and you've got Mercury, Venus, Earth, Mars, Jupiter. Is that what everyone thinks? That they're all in this nice little flat plane? Because guess what? These planets are actually all pulled, their orbits all sort of go off that way from the galactic. Because they've all been pulled by this brown dwarf out of this normal orbit where they started. So this thing's going through backwards and forwards, and it's got a number of planets the size of Jupiter around it. And at some time in the past, because it cuts through here, one of the planets from here collided with a planet that used to be where the asteroid belt was. And the bulk of it kept going off around this sun and reformed. But part of it went crashing off into what is now Earth's orbit, this rotating bit of molten rock, and the leftovers stayed in where the asteroid belt is. That seems pretty simple, doesn't it? Scientists telling you that? No. Why are they not telling you that? Because they don't want you to know that we could have a collision, because that would scare us. So we won't tell you that. They discovered it because in 1983 they put up IRIS, the infrared satellite. 9 months after they put IRIS up, they announced that they had found this brown dwarf. And 2 days later, they denied it. No, we didn't. We didn't find anything. They covered the whole thing up straight away. But the cat was out of the bag because they'd already made the announcement. In 1992, they put up, I think it was 2 more infrared satellites. From 2002 to 2009, they put up another 7 infrared satellites. They spent billions of dollars fixing the Hubble telescope because it was broken, and turned it into an infrared telescope. Suddenly, there's all this interest in infrared telescopes. They even built one at the South Pole. Why would you build one at the South Pole? Well, it just so happens, here's north and south, and I'm doing it upside down from where it was before, but the orbit of this thing is that way. So the best place to view it is from the South Pole. They say it's because the air is clear there. But they rushed to build this thing in 2004. They rushed to build it. So suddenly they've put all of these infrared satellites up. So what are they focusing on? What are they actually looking at? Interestingly enough, there's a little comet called Elenin. Now, according to NASA, this was discovered by a Russian amateur astronomer, and you can even find a page about him and information about him on the web. And he discovered this tiny little comet, which has an orbit, strangely enough, that comes in and around the Sun, and then there's the orbit of Mercury, Venus and Mars. I did a little bit of checking with some colleagues of mine in LA, one of whom who is very closely connected in. He's a past president of the Navy Reserve, very connected in through the CIA and the FBI. And I asked him about this Elenin, discovered by Leonid Elenin. I said, what's the story? He said, he doesn't exist. It's a cover name. He said, it's not a comet, and we'll go into why it's not a comet, but it's coming from the constellation of Leo. The whole project is under the overview of the National Institute of Defence, and Elenin is an acronym for Extinction Level Event Near Impact Nibiru. I said, whoa, smoking gun here. But I want more proof, because they say it's a comet. Now, a comet is made of dust, dirt and ice. Okay? It doesn't have an infrared spectrum. Okay? And it doesn't have a huge gravitational field. It's just a chunk of dust and ice. So why have they got infrared satellites tracking it? Why are they using their most expensive infrared satellites tracking a dust and ice ball? That doesn't add up to me. That doesn't make sense. Also, do you remember when Comet Kohoutek came through and Comet Halley came through? And whenever there was a comet coming through, NASA are jumping up and down saying, you've got to see, it's going to look fantastic. It's going to be across the sky, and there was all of this hype about comets, 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 comets. Heard anything from NASA about Elenin? Because guess what? At its closest point to the Earth, it's only 21 million miles away. That's 1/5 the distance between us and the Sun. Most of the other comets that they've talked about have been out here somewhere. 400, 500 million miles away. And they were jumping up and down. And they're saying nothing about this? That doesn't add up to me. Doesn't add up. Something doesn't add up. But I'm still not thinking they're lying to us much. So then I started looking. And there was a coincidence. Because I'll get my dates right, it was February 27th, and you may have this on your list. February 27th, 2010, this little comet was in a direct alignment between the Earth and the Sun. Direct alignment. Now, vibrational harmonics work such that if they directly line up, you get an amplification of energy. So gravitational waves are no difference to that. If they line up, the gravitational waves amplify. So on that date, there was an earthquake in Chile of, it was huge, 9 point something or other. That's just a coincidence, isn't it? That this little comet is in directly line with the Earth and the Sun, and there's a massive earthquake on it. That's just a coincidence. Well, there was another coincidence, because when the Earth came around the other side here, and the Earth was in alignment, and then the comet was a little bit closer, but they're in alignment again, and that was September 4th, 2010. There was an earthquake in Christchurch. That was just another coincidence, by the way. 2 coincidences. And then the Earth came back round again, and then the next time it was in alignment with the Sun, and now this is closer, March 11th, there's an earthquake in Japan. Once is a coincidence, twice is pushing it, 3 times, wait a minute, something's going on here. And on there you will see a list of every time this little comet is in alignment with our planet and either the Sun or some other body, there's a major earthquake. No way could that be a comet. All of those alignments, earthquake, 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 all the changes that are going on, here's a smoking gun. But do we have any other proof? Because I'm not trying to convince you here, I'm just saying I'm having questions about this. Are you all aware of Google Earth? That you can punch in any address and bang, you can see it. Are you also aware that there are certain areas, because NASA controls Google Earth. Did we say who NASA are, by the way? You know they're not a US department. They're a private company. And NASA came from Nazi Germany. All the guys that built all the rockets, they were all from Nazi Germany. Because NASA is owned by the Illuminati. Okay? So NASA have an agenda. Okay? So when we go to Google Earth, try and have a look at Area 51. Why not? Because it's blacked out, isn't it? It's censored. Okay? Because they don't want you to know what's going on there. So they censor it. They put a big black square on it. So that's Google Earth. Are you aware of Google Sky? Google Sky is run by, guess who? NASA. And they plug into all of their satellites. So you can go into Google Sky and you can look at the whole sky as it is right now. So when I say this to you, go to Google Sky and have a look at the constellation of Leo. No, it's not blacked out. Okay? When you look at it, there's nothing untoward about it. Then go to the little right-hand corner and shift up in the infrared spectrum. And as you shift it to the infrared spectrum, suddenly appears an object that looks like that in the infrared spectrum. The winged destroyer the ancient Egyptians talk about. Here's a little brown dwarf. In the constellation of Leo, coming towards it.
They will show that, but they won't show Area 51. So they're kind of giving me information on here, but not...
Because they think that most of us are absolutely stupid and wouldn't even bother looking. And they can fob it off, left, right and centre. The interesting thing is, though, if you go into the constellation of Virgo and have a look, there's a big black square in the constellation of Virgo. And you can see something coming out from behind it, which is a binary star system. Now, this might sound bizarre, but the reason they're blacking that out is because there are things coming from that star system. Visitors. Those of you who have read the books of Baval and West, who say that Orion is the copy of the stars in the sky, that when you see the pyramids on the ground in Giza, okay, and you're spot on, because they're a mirror image. They're not a copy of it. They're a mirror image. And the Egyptians don't work that way. So the only way that those could match up would be if the pyramids were built when the earth was up the other way. So the pyramids were built before the last pole shift. Okay? There's no one else that's got that yet. Okay? It's pretty simple. It's like, oh, right. Here's another thing. The Sphinx used to have a lion's head. And if you knew that something was going to happen on a particular date in your calendar, what would you do? You'd mark it. Ahead of schedule, you'd mark it. Well, they knew thousands of years ahead that something was going to come from the constellation of Leo at that time when it lines up there. So the Sphinx wasn't built at the time that it lines up. It was built way before it as a warning to say when this lines up in the constellation of Leo, that's when the shit's going to hit the fan. And that was the last pole shift.
Alex, quick question.
Yep.
Can you actually see that it's blacked out?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
But why don't they do it properly and completely remove it so you wouldn't even question if something was blacked out there?
Because we're stupid. And we're not even going to look at that.
There is exactly the address where you can go and punch it.
Yeah.
And who's going to believe anyone that...
Oh, exactly. Exactly. And they'll just discredit you or whatever. Because they just don't want you. And if they discredit you enough and make it difficult enough, then you'll give up, won't you?
Also, Alex, why Egypt?
Egypt.
Why that particular part of the earth? Why it's not somewhere like, I don't know, in Asia?
Okay. There are pyramids off the coast of Japan. There are pyramids in China. They're all built around the 19.5 degree mark. And there's a reason for that. Okay, there's a reason for that. Because that diagram I showed you of the flower of life creates what they call geometric solids. Please tell me I've got a mental block on the sacred geometries. And when you create a tetrahedron, it looks like the Star of David, but imagine they're three-dimensional. And when they fit inside a sphere, the points where these touch are at 19.5 degrees in the latitude. So they're energy points.
Sorry, is there any correlation with like the Jewish symbol?
That's a whole other lecture. Okay, every single religion has been created by the Illuminati to ensnare people. Every single religion, including New Age, including the New Age religions. They control everything. We'll get to that in the second half. It's a great question, and it's one that might shock you a little bit, but we'll work through it. So here's this body coming through. Look, we've got a brown dwarf coming through. The evidence is overwhelming. They're trying to hide it. They don't want you to know about it. What we want to know is, okay, we know the impacts are going to be pretty big, but how big and when? What's the time frame? August 17th. I've gone publicly on this one because there is an alignment between the Earth, Venus, the Sun and Mercury. They're in a straight line, and Nibiru is at right angles to the Sun. At August the 17th, I'm being told there's going to be a massive earthquake on the planet. It will probably be somewhere between Alaska and San Francisco. When the Japan earthquake happened, Nibiru sort of comes through like that. And there's a time now where Nibiru and our Earth are travelling at the same rate. So we're not seeing any major changes because it's still around about 1.5 AU away. AU is a measure of the distance between the Earth and the Sun. It's like the radius measurement. When the Japan earthquake happened, it was 2 AU away, and we had a magnitude 9 earthquake. The next alignment happens on September 26th this year, and it is between us and the Sun. And at that point, it is 0.38 away from us. Now, gravitational fields, it's 0.38, which is around about 40 million miles. It's 4/10 of the distance to the sun. Gravitational fields and infrared work on what's called an inverse square relationship. So every unit of distance, the force magnifies by the square of it. When it was 2 away, we had a magnitude 9 earthquake. On September 26, the forces are 25 times greater. The gravitational forces, the infrared forces, they're all 25 times greater on that date. What I'm being told is on September 26th, the whole Pacific Rim will go with magnitude 12 to 15 earthquakes. Magnitude 12 to 15 earthquakes. Okay? That is totally consistent with the mathematics. I said there's going to be stuff that, you know, you might go, what? The whole Pacific Rim. New Zealand will disappear. Japan will disappear. Indonesia will disappear. China will disappear. Korea will disappear. Russia will disappear. The west coast of America will disappear. The whole lot.
What about Australia?
Whole lot.
What about Australia?
East coast of Australia will not be affected by the earthquakes per se, but they will be affected by the tidal waves that come from it. Okay, I want to talk a little bit before that. Okay? Before that happens, as you get into August, and this gets closer, the gravitational effects of this brown dwarf star are going to start to pull not only on the crust of the planet greater, but they're going to pull on our little old moon. Now, at the moment, the moon's got a fairly spherical orbit around the Earth, okay? But as this brown dwarf gets closer, it's going to pull the moon closer to it, and the moon is going to have a more elliptical orbit. So what's going to happen is the moon is going to be pulled into more elliptical orbit. What effect will that have on the planet? The effect it will have is that whenever the moon is here, its gravitational pull on the water will be greater, so you are going to have massive king tides. So expect through August and the beginning of September that the major coastal cities of the world will all be flooded at some point. Not tidal waves, but massive tides. London, Amsterdam, Melbourne, Sydney, Venice. If there's a coastal city it's whole Netherlands.
And what about places like Hawaii, Thailand, in terms of tidal surges?
Everyone's going to be affected by it. Everyone's going to be affected by this. If you're living on the coast, and we've said to people, you're going to get a warning, sell your property and get out of there.
Can I ask you something?
Yep.
I also, a few years,
Shh, folks, please, I can't hear.
a few months back on TV, remember how we had that minor eclipse? I think it was last year.
That was a lunar eclipse. Yeah.
Now they're saying that we're going to have a major eclipse in November, but I don't know if it's this year or next year. I think they said next year.
Okay. Before we even get to that,
Okay.
September 26th, okay, for about a week before that, this object is going to be very, very obvious in our skies. One of the link, oh, no, I don't think I put it on that sheet. There is a link of somebody who went into Soho, which is the, looks at the sun, and it's beautiful. It's March 15th or something like that. And there's an image of the sun, and there's an image of Venus, and there's this big black object there. Black, not throwing any light off, it's black. He went back a day later to confirm it all, and NASA had airbrushed it out. Airbrushed it out, because it was inside the orbit of Venus, which is where it is at the moment. So, this object is going to cover 1/5 of the sky. Okay, 1/5 of the sky, and it's going to be moving along. By then, anarchy will be ruling because they'll have collapsed the financial markets and they'll have put most people into concentration camps. Does everyone know about the FEMA camps? Okay, the FEMA camps, there's about 800 of them around the US, and they house 50,000 people upwards. And they are detention centres with barbed wire and the whole thing around them. 800 of them that can house 50,000 people each adds up to 40 million people. They're all fully manned, and yet the American prison system is overcrowded. Why can't they put some of their lower people into these detention centres? And the interesting thing about these FEMA camps is they have stockpiled coffins that can hold 3 bodies at a time. Why does the American government know that they're going to have to put 40 million people into detention centres for? Okay? And they're going to dispose of the bodies? Does this sound like something that happened? And who are the same people that are running all of this? It was a trial. They trialled everything out in the 40s. When this object goes across the sky, it's going to cause an eclipse that will last at least 3 days. At least 3 days. But here's the big thing. When it lines up with the sun and our planet, there is going to be a cosmic sonic shockwave that will totally blow out our Van Allen belts and our magnetic fields, and will leave the planet totally open to gamma radiation. It's what they call in the Bible Gabriel's trumpet. When Gabriel's horn shall blow, the world shall da-da-da. It's a sonic blast to do with the lining up. The magnetic fields will be... They're already being weakened. It's like watching Star Trek. When the shields go down, bang. If you are out in the open at that point, you will literally be fried alive. It's like the vampire jumping out into the light. That's what's going to happen. So you need to be able to get out of direct light for the whole duration that our magnetic field is down, which could be up to 2-3 weeks. Okay, so that's the first big thing. So you've got massive earthquakes happening. Basically every volcano on the planet will go off at that time. Are you all aware of the super volcano in Yosemite National Park? No, those of you who aren't? There is a volcano in the northern part of America under Yosemite National Park. The caldera is 200 miles long and 80 miles wide. Last year I got an email that said in 3 days there had been 1,100 earthquakes in that spot. But it was nothing to worry about. The lake bed has risen. The lake is so hot now that no fish can survive in it. And there was 1,100 earthquakes just in one 3-day period, but it's nothing to worry about. Am I going to believe them? When you go to the site that shows all the earthquakes around the world, and they are airbrushing off and taking off earthquakes that are happening in certain locations because they don't want you to know that they're going on, because the US government has written off 60 million of its people who live in the top northwest. Because if it told them the truth, it would have to relocate them. And they're all expendable. So it's prepared to let them die. So you're going to have all these volcanoes going off. So you're going to have pyroclastic blasts going everywhere. So you've got level 12, 13 magnitude earthquakes, volcanoes at the same point. You know, it's not going to shift a little bit like this. We're talking about the distance here and there dropping like 400 metres down, not little bucklings. Okay? Have you ever seen like images of the French Alps that show the rock strata like that, side on? That happens in the space of a couple of minutes because the power of the earthquake causes the rock to liquefy and form waves. And then they break, and then when it stops, they reconfigure like that. They tell you that all of these mountain ranges have all been formed over thousands and hundreds of thousands of years. Lie. They happen in the space of minutes. Machu Picchu was a seaside village because Lake Titicaca is a salt lake and it's 1,500 metres in the air. It happened overnight when the pole shift happens. These are the extremes that these things happen at. So we've got the cosmic waves that are going to hit. You're going to have wind speeds over 1,000 miles an hour. You're going to have surface temperatures of 60 degrees plus. There will be wildfires all over the planet. Airspeed, cosmic radiation, all the water surfaces are going to dry up. The volcanic ash is going to cause huge amounts of acid rain. So the electromagnetic pulses are going to fry all electrics. Have you noticed how the satellites and TVs are starting to play up? Yeah? They're all going to go down. And they're trying to patch it and cover it up so you don't notice it. But as this thing gets closer, more and more of the satellites are going to go down. Okay? So that's September 26. Moving on from September 26, the next date you have to be concerned about is October the 17th. October the 17th, Nibiru is now 0.23. It's the closest point that it comes to us. That's 21 million miles away from the Earth. So at 21 mils, if there are any volcanoes that have not gone off by then, if there's any part of the planet that is not separated by then, it will do it then. Because the forces involved are now over 80 times what they were when the Japan earthquake happened. Next date on from that is November the 2nd, 3rd through to the 7th. And what happened then was, when this thing's coming through and it passed through the asteroid belt, it picked up a few travellers with it, like the tin cans behind a wedding car. So here you've got this massive gravitational object goes through the asteroid belt and it drags a whole lot of stuff with it. Some of them are this big, some of them are 100 miles large. Now the scientists will tell you that we've had all these extinction level events that stopped the Cambrian and the Mesozoic, 65 million years ago, that wiped out the dinosaurs, and they say there is something that causes an extinction level event every 26 million years. Well, sometimes when Nibiru comes through, we're not here at this close point, we're on the other side of the sun, so we're safe. But sometimes, maybe every 26 million years, we pass through the tail of this. And on November the 3rd to the 7th, we pass through the tail of this brown dwarf. So we are running a whole asteroid field. We're going to get huge numbers of showers. I've had this vision since I was a child, and now I know what it's about. It's a recurring thing that's coming to me year after year after year after year. Now I know what it's about. We have one saving grace at that time. Our moon is on the lee side. It can potentially shield us from some of the impacts. But I'm being told there will be major cities who will be obliterated by being hit by asteroids. And it's not one or two. There's going to be showers, massive showers of them, for about 3 days. And if you look at the other side of the moon, it is totally pockmarked with impact craters, different to the side that we see. So clearly it's done some sort of protection in the past. That's November. Then November the 11th, there is another alignment. As it's now gone past, we come through it and we line up on the outside of it. I think it's 0.56 away. So there will be more earthquakes that day. I'm feeling that the most likely time when the crust will totally separate and turn upside down will be October 17. Because that's when the gravitational forces... It could go before then. It could go before then. So November the 11th, then November 23rd, there's another alignment which could cause more earthquakes, etc. But from then on, it starts to move further and further out. That's what's going to happen. That's when it's going to happen. And the wheres are pretty much everywhere will be affected. There are safe places to be, and we'll get into that in the second half, not just physically but also spiritually. Okay, we're just giving you the physical stuff now, and then in the second half, Crystal will take you through a lot of the spiritual understandings, which will get you to understand why you've chosen to be here at this time when this is happening. And we'll cover a little bit of that in the second half. The last thing I want to leave you with before we have a break is this 2012. So what does 2012 mean? Okay. Where does the date December 21st, 2012 come from? December 21st, 2012. Mayan calendar? No. No. That date comes from the Illuminati. The date does not exist in the Mayan calendar. The Mayans do not talk about, they don't have our calendar date. So what people have supposedly done is they've tried to match the Mayan calendar to ours. But the Mayans don't talk about their calendar ending on a particular date as being significant. Like we don't go, oh, December 31st is the end of some massive thing. They talk about a change. They talk about a shift from the fifth sun, from the end of the fourth sun into the fifth sun. They don't mention anything about a brown dwarf. The Mayans talk about a shift of the sun. That's really important, the fourth sun, and we'll get into that. The date is being given by the Illuminati to trap the New Age people. To trap them into believing they have to prepare for this date so they're caught totally unawares by what's going to happen in the next 2 months. And most New Age people have bought it hook, line and sinker. Because it's all tied into the Mayan calendar, and therefore it's about the ascension. And there's going to be no big earth changes because we can pray them away and we can do all of that, which we'll get into the second half. The Mayans talk about earth changes that precede it, but not at the same time. So what's happened is everybody has dumped everything onto this Illuminati constructed day. Everything to do with the birth of Jesus and all these things, they're all things that are tied into Illuminati ritual. That just happens to be the winter solstice. What a coincidence. Because the Illuminati are all into that sort of stuff. Dates and all sorts of things. That comes from them. It's not a real date. But coincidentally, around that time is the beginning of a transition period. Okay? What else was I going to say about that? So yeah, Nostradamus, Edgar Cayce, all of those prophecies that relate to what's going to happen in the next 2 months have all been dumped onto this date because people are stupid and they'll buy it. And if you tell them enough times, it comes from the Mayan calendar, they'll believe it. It's not in the Mayan calendar at all. Nowhere. And here's another interesting thing. The Mayans were smart. They had the number 0. If I go from 3 BC to 2 BC to 1 BC, what year's next?
0.
The next year is 1 AD. There is no year 0 in our calendar. So straight away, we've lost a year off there. And at the time, there were 3 different calendars running at the turn of the millennium. 3 different calendars. And it's got pulled here, there and everywhere. Okay, it wasn't until Pope Gregory in 540 AD or something like that that we got the calendar that we have now. Which, interestingly enough, was based on an old Mayan calendar, an old Egyptian calendar, and all those things. So they've borrowed. Every religion has been created by the Illuminati and megalomaniacs, borrowing stuff from here, there and everywhere. There's not an ounce of truth in any of it. If you're interested, I could tell you who Moses really was and who Jesus really was. and how they've been corrupted and how they've been twisted to enslave the masses, to stop you from free thinking that you have a total connection to Source every single microsecond. And there are no rules. Source does not have rules. There is no good and evil. There is no right or wrong. It's just an experience. And if Source doesn't have those rules and says to you, whatever you do enriches my being, then why do we suddenly feel that we have to listen to someone who tells us that we can only access that spiritual knowledge through them? And we have to do what they tell us to do, or we're heretics and be burned at the stake or excommunicated or something like that.
So is karma part of the lie?
Karma is non-existent unless you choose to believe it. There is only cause and effect. I let go of the pen, it falls down. There is no good or bad. But if you believe in karma, that's what you will manifest, because you have total free will to create whatever you want. So 2012. What's 2012 about? I'll give you what that's about and then we'll have a break. Okay. Our solar system is part of the Milky Way galaxy. And you've probably all seen pictures of the Milky Way galaxy. It's like a spiral galaxy that's looking at it from the top. And looking at it from side on, sort of looks a little bit like a UFO sort of thing. At the middle of our galaxy, as with all galaxies, is a black hole, massive black hole. And black holes give out energy in two directions. They give it out in pulses that radiate outwards, like when you drop a pebble in a pond and they radiate out. So that's like on a plane, and they send it out in a spike from the centre. Okay, so here's our plane going through here, which is a big disc, and the pulses radiate out from there. Now our solar system's out here somewhere on one of these arms. We're not even a major player in the galaxy. Seriously, the human form is not. But everything revolves around something. So not only do we revolve around the galaxy, but we revolve around another solar system, i.e. Sirius. Ever wondered why we're so connected to Sirius? It's because we're in a paired orbit around a black hole in Alcyon. So we're going up and down as we go around, like that. Like a carousel horse, going up and down. Is anyone familiar with the Vedic yugas, where they divide civilization up to periods of ascent and descent? It covers like 520,000 years or something like that. As we go up here, we're getting further away from the galactic plane, which is a gravity, and we slow down. And then we get pulled back and we accelerate. We are in a position of acceleration at the moment, and we're just about to go into this galactic plane, which is also known as the photon band. Okay? So what happens when we hit the photon band? Because people talk about spiritual ascension. Okay. It is impossible for you to spiritually ascend. Do you know why? Because you're already there. Remember how I said everything comes from Source downwards? Your higher self has chosen to manifest into this dimension to experience. You've chosen to manifest. You may have forgotten it because you're caught up in the third dimensional stuff, but you cannot ascend to something that you already are. You just become aware of where you're perceiving it from. Are you so caught up in the play that you believe you're the character, or are you sitting in the audience admiring your work? You can't ascend because you already are every single vibrational aspect. So what is this so-called ascension about? I'm going to go back to nuclear physics, and I'm going to go to an atom, and the simplest atom of hydrogen, because we have a lot of hydrogen in us. We're basically hydrogen, oxygen and carbon. That's what most of us are. So we have a proton here, and we have an electron in what they call a shell. Does everyone sort of remember that from basic science or something like that? And then you get to helium, and helium has 2 and 2, and then you get the next one up and you get another shell and another shell. Even hydrogen, even though it's only got one proton here, this other energy shell still exists. Remember how we went back to the sun has these vibrational things that cause the planets to form in certain areas? As above, so below. The macro and the micro is exactly the same. When we go through the photon band, it's a huge pulse of energy. Ever put your foot down on the pedal of a piano and hit one note? And all the others vibrate? And it goes woo! When we go through the photon band, every single atom in your body gets hit by this energy, and the electrons jump to the next level, or maybe even to the level beyond that. So every single atom in your body becomes energized. And as you do that, you become less dense. Higher vibration, less dense. Which people go, oh, it's fifth dimensional existence. That's the physics of it. It's not some spiritual thing that you have to work to do. You could do that anytime you choose by shifting your perception. But what's happening here on this planet is a very, very different thing. This is going to happen, but it's the agenda behind it. And the second half, we're going to get into the who and the why.